time to talk with me. This is just a conversation. And just to give you the context to better understand the reason why I would like to have this conversation with you. With Trinity, we were to do a project on the migration, both in Sicily, in San Antonio, and then go to Sicily and work with the migrants there, and then create forum theater projects, both in San Antonio and then there, and also compare the stories of the migrants. Fortunately, that could not be. But we did not want to give up on this project, and we made a change. Reacting to COVID-19, and the change was now to focus on the reaction of the administration or administrations around the world to COVID-19 and whether or not their decisions have had a negative impact on human rights. And then also at the same time, checking on the artists and see how artists are doing, how they are reacting. And I've been talking with artists. I want to talk to you too as an activist and artist yourself, because instead of getting the news from the newspapers or the social media, it's nice always to talk to the source, which is also one of the ways we work. We always talk to the people directly instead of finding a medium there. So that's what we wanted to talk about. But we want to focus on the artists more than the art. So you also run SEISI, which is a major organization that is dedicated to the developing of the dreams and the talents of youths that are more marginalized. But I'm sure you have more, you will do it, you will say it best. So if you could introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure.
Also, because, and then we would like to know where you, John, were when you realized that we had a problem. You would be in quarantine, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for this, and thank you for the work. I think the reality for all of us is that one is we didn't know, we were sort of short-sighted in knowing that this was coming, and then also we didn't recognize the severity and impact of what it was going to do for our own organizations, for arts in general, and more importantly, when you talk about sort of the human rights for this global community. I think that that's the thing that, and we're still unfortunately learning that every day, and the kind of impact that it's having. So my name is Jon Hinojosa. I'm the Artistic Executive Director of SEISI. SEISI is a creative youth development organization and arts education program that serves urban inner city economically disadvantaged youth in San Antonio, Texas. So we've celebrated our 25th year here, and the reason that we existed 25 years ago and the reason that we exist now is to lift, support, and commit to inner city young people who are creative and talented. And so when we started 25 years ago, we started with a small group of students. What we recognized is that there was a great need and a great importance to the work that we did. And so while we started very small, working with inner city kids 25 years ago, we are now a pretty large institution. We have 5 distinct disciplines under the heading of SEISI, so we're a multidisciplinary organization that works with young people in the arts. And the biggest piece of it and the most important piece of it is that we primarily work with inner city kids, and it is completely free. There is no charge, there is no tuition. It is just an opportunity for kids to find a place of belonging, to find their voice, to get the resources and equipment and materials that they need to create, and then to have committed mentors and teaching artists who are going to support their work. And so that's the work that I've been doing for the last couple of decades. And then in addition to that, the other thread that's really important to us is that in addition to working with inner city economically disadvantaged youth in the arts, social justice is a really important piece of our work. And it's not because we as an organization say we're a social justice organization. It's because our young people say they're paying attention, they're watching, they see these injustices. And so they want to make a difference in distinct how they could create work that speaks to issues of justice in our communities.
So where were you when you realized that you had to close? And
yeah, I think that we're open extended hours when schools are closed. And so we had just completed the first week of spring break with our students. So during spring break, we have extended hours, kids come more, they get more work done. And that was when early on things were sort of happening locally when it came to, there was a large writers conference here the week before that. And the conversation discussion was it shouldn't have happened, there's a risk. We didn't have all the details about the pandemic, but we already knew something was going on. We were open spring break, that second week in March for our students. And then the schools decided to extend spring break and not allow students to go back into the schools. And that's when I recognized that Monday that there was something really serious going on and that there was something that was going to be problematic for us as an organization and for our students. So what we decided to do that Monday, that third Monday in March, was we decided to not have our kids come back into the spaces, to go ahead and ask them to stay at home. And what we did is we worked with our teaching artists and program staff to start thinking and strategizing about and looking at all kinds of scenarios about what if we can get our kids back, what if we can't, what could we be doing as an organization to shift and change. And luckily, I would just say that we had already, we have 2 media labs in our studio, right? So as part of our program, we have a film and photography studio, and we have a new media and game design studio. So we're pretty technically savvy in the kind of work that we do. We had already created some systems of connecting with our students through an application called Trello. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a project application where all of our studio students and staff work on it programmatically, but also organizationally. So we had some already systems in place to recognize that we were going to have to do more virtual learning than not. And so I think it was, we opened up on Monday without our students. We had program meetings and conversations and discussions. I could sense the fragility of our staff in concerns in their health and welfare. And so we decided the very second day on Tuesday, that third week in March, to completely physically close the organization, to have our staff work from home, and for me to, and our administrative leaders to start planning the fact that we're probably not going to be able to open up our facility. And so that was really difficult as somebody who's been at this from a long time, because what we recognized in our work is that our spaces are for our kids, and in many ways they're safe havens, but there is the work that we do, similar to the work that you do at Trinity and as a theater professor, it's about the connectivity of students supporting other students, about the sort of collective collaborative work that happens with their peers and with their teaching artists, instructors, and mentors and professors. There's something that project-based learning, drama, film, all of these disciplines are very difficult to work from a distance and virtually. And so what we spent some time, and I thought a little bit more time than we needed to, was how do we meet our students where their needs are, but at the same time, how do we shift our perspective and recognize that long term, our kids are going to want and need to come back to our spaces. And that's what we've been working on. I think we did a really good job of shifting our learning but at the same time, one of the projects that we did early on is we surveyed our students and parents. Second week of the time that we were no longer open and we were closed, we have a text-based project that we work with to be able to connect our parents and to our students. We also have a newsletter, and we have their contact information. And so we asked them very short 5-question survey of how are you feeling? What are your needs? How can we support you? And what we heard a lot, again, because remember, students were going to virtual education in their school districts, parents were losing their jobs and positions. What we heard the most was the fact that employment was an uncertainty. We also heard that this idea of distance learning and education was very difficult, not only for students, because remember, we're a program that works with and supports middle school and high school kids, especially in our high school age students. There was a lot of difficulty in understanding this sort of virtual learning and Google Classroom and how each of their instructors were setting it up. And then we heard a lot again about mental instability and concern. And so what we were able to do is we were able to look online and find places that they could go to get the kind of support that they needed. So that was our first sort of step in recognizing, meeting our students where they need to be. The other thing that we did that I think was really beneficial and helpful and will continue is that we decided to do art supply pickups, curbside art supply pickups at SAC with a no-touch process. And again, because we work with such a vulnerable student population, one of the reasons that they love SAC is they could come into our spaces and get amazing materials, supplies, and technology. And what we recognized is that being at home, they weren't going to have that access and those opportunities. So what we did is the first 2 Saturdays that we did pickups, we created an opportunity to have just the basics, a journal, diary, sketchbook, colored pencils, watercolors, just the basics for all of our programs and all of our disciplines. And the idea behind that was just to give them and to create projects. Hey, this is what you're doing with no deadlines, no timeframes. Just, we know how stressed you are. We know this changes is difficult, but here's some ideas to be creative and start journaling, because I think that that's going to be really important to how we all overcome this, right? So we have 180 and 150 just on the fly. We order stuff, we put the packs were picked up. That was another reminder of the sort of need that we need. But the other piece that we heard in social distancing and getting parents to come and pick up those packs with their kids is, when are you going to open? We want to come back. We need to come back. And the whole thing. And so what we're doing is we're just being honest and candid with them and saying, we're going to be smart about this. And it's about your health and safety. That is the most important. So, really, those were the first initial steps that we took to sort of recognize the really shifting dynamic of what we were all dealing with and and more importantly, what our students were dealing with.
So this must be very challenging, Jon, to deal with this. So I'm going to ask you, how are you feeling?
I appreciate that. I had a lot of national friends reach out to me during this time frame too, on a personal level, just because I'm a pretty type A guy. I love to work hard. I love to move through different kinds of projects, and I had some friends just text me or call me and I said, "How are you doing? Because this must be difficult for you just based on your personality." And I'm doing okay, and in many ways, I think this situation has again allowed me and my abilities to work on multiple things to take over. So in many ways, I'm busier than I ever have been, because not only have I had the challenge with working with our leadership team to figure out how we move forward and what we create, these protocols and policies, and how we again connect to our students, but I've been working with, in addition, some national leaders and some local arts leaders. And we put together a Facebook artists, San Antonio artists helping other San Antonio artists that I'm a moderator for. And really, I've spent a lot of time just helping other artists figure out the Texas Workforce Commission and unemployment, the SBA PPP loan opportunity, connecting artists with potential commission work and patrons. I've been spending a lot of time working on a national level, how we can organizationally shift and change things on our own way. One of the biggest impacts that all of the arts organizations in San Antonio have had is that our funding was cut through the Department of Arts and Culture, right? And so most of us are not going to get any additional resources from them based on the hot tax being sort of decimated because of the tourism industry. But because I meet and talk to some of our arts leaders every Tuesday, we started saying, okay, one is whenever I did, and I'm completely honest about this, I was pissed and angry just because I just thought that what the city did was wrong on so many levels. Completely understand the circumstances, but the way that they went about to notify organizations, the way that they went to speak to specific organizations about they weren't going to give us any more money, but we were still obligated to fulfill all of our contract requirements, really frustrated me. So I reached out to the mayor and I reached out to the director of the Department of Arts and Culture. And I said, hey, listen, if we work together collaboratively, we can make a difference and we can make an impact. And while I'm not gonna look at the past, but how about we work collaboratively together to figure out a way to support individual gig artists and organizations that are struggling. And I didn't get very much of a response. So what we've done organizationally with a group of arts leaders is that said, let's work on our own campaign. Let's put together an arts advocacy campaign for our community that reminds our city leaders and our community and our funders the relevance and importance and impact that arts organizations and artists have to San Antonio. So that's taken up a lot of my busy time just because the thing that I'm the most proud of is that we sit and talk and we spend our time dealing with the realities of COVID-19 in our own organizations. But what's been amazing about these conversations is, okay, let's figure out a way that we can work even more collaboratively and supportive. And not only within the context of creating this sort of arts advocacy campaign, but we've always talked, you and me even, Roberto, about collaborative ways that we can work, right? And for whatever happens is usually more and more we get busy in our own sort of world, we get busy in our own kind of work, and those ideas sort of slip by the wayside. So for me, the conversations that I'm having and arts leaders are having about not only should we do this campaign, but also let's continue this collaborative work and commitment.
It's wonderful to hear. And one of the things that I have learned through these conversations, not just with local artists and leaders and activists, but nationally, internationally, is that there should be, do you need to talk to somebody? Yes, we can stop 1 second, don't worry.
I'm sorry, give me 1 second, yeah.
Yeah, of course. That's okay. Actually, it's part of this way of communicating. Now I notice that everything happens, and that's fine because we are in our environments, and that's the reality of it. So while before having someone showing up was like, oh my gosh, how funny, now it's normal. So don't worry, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Luckily, I don't have young kids because that's become a big thing for everybody too, as they're dealing with and handling their kids. So it's just my wife, my dog, my older daughter, and the exterminator now. Hey, brother, we're good. Yeah. So the one piece though, to get back to where we were, Roberto, the thing that I really do appreciate is, and the thing that sort of makes me excited and hopeful, is how so many of us who do this work individually with our own organizations recognize that we should be collaborating and working together more, and that we should stop depending on other people to take up the responsibilities, that if we don't do it ourselves, sometimes nothing really is going to happen. And so, for instance, we just applied for the NEA CARES Act, as well as many other cultural arts organizations as well. And what we did, which I thought was really important, is that we have, our request to the National Endowment for the Arts is to be able to put together a project in the late fall, winter of this year, or even move it to early next year, depending on what's going to happen. But the other piece is we put all of our funding requests for the NEA into being able to hire local and regional artists to work with us and work with our students remotely. So being able to, because again, we're a multidisciplinary organization, the idea is to look at the artists that we have hired in the past as visiting artists, but look at others to come in and work with our kids and to talk about these issues of COVID-19. And what does it mean individually, but what does it mean as a community? And what I'm excited about is that because of the work that I'm doing to help and support sort of the local San Antonio artists, I love the idea that our focus and our funds are going to be able to support individual artists. But in the conversations that I'm having on Tuesdays with arts leaders, I said, here's the thing, if we get these funds, we can open it up to kids who are being at Blue Star Contemporary in the Mosaic program. We can open it up to the Teen Council of Art Pay. So the idea behind this is that not only have we been talking about ways to collaborate, but more importantly, I just feel like there will be fruition in those commitments as we move forward as organizations during this time frame.
And this is fantastic, John. One of the things that I've discovered through these conversations with art leaders and artists locally, nationally, internationally is this: a difference between the art and the artist, right? And let's put aside the art that the artists do, but let's focus on the artist. And we know that the artists are those that live in a consistent, constant state of crisis, right? We always go from one crisis to the other because it's part of our creative process. We are the ones that have to manage our money very intelligently. We are the people that troubleshoot every problem. Art is about finding a solution. Art is about thinking new worlds. So it occurred to me that the artists are the people that are best equipped to overcome this crisis, the artists. But you told me that you could not reach, our political leaders. I have tried to talk to Ron too, but I haven't been able to. Yeah. My question is, if there should be a place around the table of artists, for artists, to contribute to the solution of this crisis.
Absolutely.
Not only about artists collaborating with other artists, because we do this all the time, and now we are doing it better, right? You have already found solutions. And I bet that your solutions are more creative than the solutions that have been figured out, if there are, in the political realm, in those administering us. So the point is this: we cannot go back to how it was before. The system of this hot tax doesn't work, has failed us. Right? We have to find a new system to finance the arts. But also we have to find a new place for the artists within the decision-making of our community. I mean, if someone like you, and I, I've been in San Antonio for 15 years, I know you all. I work with you, and there are so many very talented people that have built fantastic organizations like, say, See From Nothing. These are people like you that have a vision, are troubleshooters,
Yeah.
and can sit around the table with the others that are now advising Ron Nuremberg, our mayor, and maybe contribute without asking for funding, but
Right.
contributing to the solution of this crisis. And then the same people contributing to the creation of a new system. This is not happening, my friend.
I so agree with you, and it's something I think about all the time. You know, they created these, let's get San Antonio back to business. Let's look at the health, you know, they've got doctors and medical people on the COVID-19, but if they had artists in those committees, we are problem solvers. That's all we do on a daily basis, multiple problems, not even just one problem.
Right.
And it's always a creative, outside the box way of thinking about it, but that usually works and has a strong positive impact. I agree with you. To me, and by the way, it was something that I suggested in a reminder to our folks, is that there are some brilliant arts leaders that are ready to join and sit at that table and help resolve this issue with the hot tax and with opportunities. And so, again, not to put blame, the piece of it is I know how busy the mayor is. I know how busy folks are trying to deal with this. But again, the problem that we have in this city that's really disappointing is that we're taking a Band-Aid approach to figuring out solutions. Like, for instance, I am super grateful and happy that the city found some money. They took money from other sources to be able to do the rent help and utilities and everything else. And I shared that information with our artists so that they could take advantage of that. So it's a good thing to do, but guess what? That's a bad, can we continue to do that? Doubtful. But what if we took funds and support and gave artists the kind of professional development training that they need to be good entrepreneurs, to understand marketing, to understand businesses, so that they take their creative and brilliant talent and have, again, sort of this business perspective, so that when situations and issues like this come again, it will take far less money to create these kinds of trainings and opportunities for our artists. What's also disappointing for me, so I am 100% with you, I just don't know who we need to talk to make it happen, but it just, to me, it would be the long-term solution. And I think what ends up happening that people forget is San Antonio is a beautiful, amazing, creative city. That's one of the reasons that we all live here and love it, but it's also a very, very poor city. And while we provide these sort of nets to support and help people when they're in crisis, if we would shift our dynamic and create creative ways to really help the issues of poverty, to really help the issues of gig artists, to create more stable environments, we would be in a much richer city when it comes to the kind of support and efforts that we're doing. So I'm 100% with you. I just don't know. I don't know who we need to talk to make that happen.
Well, the elected officials, obviously, because that is, as you mentioned, a long-term solution, but the time is now to start implementing it. So I will try to reach again Ron. I'm probably going to post some kind of a letter to Ron dealing with this. But I think that if we go from, if we organize, this video is going to be public. I talked to Sebastian Langlessing that
he just wrote an editorial for the Rivard Report. Yeah, he sent it to me. Yeah.
So we talked about this that we are talking. He's on board also. There are some. There are brilliant people here, whose talents are not being used.
Yeah.
And I know that being an artist and knowing all the artists, one thing that the artists have, they are very generous people. They will run. We will run to help.
They want to work and support and help, and that's the other piece of it too. Is that, like you said, it's so. I can't believe we're in sort of this myopic place, because I think that the more that you here's the other thing that I think is important, is that definitely continue these conversations and share them. one of the problems that I have, but it's a problem that is okay with me because it's my personality. I tend to make people angry and because I push. And sometimes we've got to find the mediator in this. And there's some great arts leaders that could be that mediator. I'm always gonna say what I mean, my philosophy in the work that I do and who I am is I'm always gonna be honest and I'm always gonna be transparent. Reality is you may not like what I say, but it's gonna be what I feel is the truth, right? So it's this whole truth to power. But there are some good folks that can sort of bridge that so that maybe they get a little bit more less pushback from folks, just because everything that you suggested I've brought up to our city leaders. And again, we can certainly keep apologizing for them for being busy, but the time is now. The time is now to act on this versus later.
Right. Well, I have been in some meetings with where I heard you spoke out and thank goodness that you did that. So I think that well, probably we have to be more political at times.
Yeah.
We cannot justify that, but definitely we have to move forward because this is the other piece. Is the role? What is the role not of the arts? Because we all know the role of the arts. We can go back to history and see what everybody knows. Even those that don't want to know, they know. But what is the role now of the artists?
Yeah.
And we need to have this conversation with every artist, not just the leaders of the organizations, but the artists themselves, the ones that are in the studios.
Yes.
Right? The ones that are in the rehearsal space working to create art, because those are the ones that are solution makers, right? Yeah. And see and find a way. We're gonna find a way. If we cannot do that, so we are defying the principle, right, of sitting at that table of decision makers.
Yeah.
And contributing not to get more money for the arts. Yeah. It's not that, but solving the problem, because I know that you have solutions. I have solutions. Others have solutions, creative solutions. And then while we are at the table, being mindful of every artist.
Every artist.
And then being at the table, having a conversation, okay, how can we not support. I mean, the word support is such a bad word at times, because this idea of the artist as a person that begs for money doesn't work for me.
Doesn't work for me.
I'm teaching with my colleague Luis Martinez a class called Arts Entrepreneurship Mindset, because we want to give the artist the mindset of the entrepreneur, just what you said, right? Yeah. So, and we are entrepreneurs.
We are, absolutely. But more skill sets will make us even stronger and better. And so it's sitting at the table and working together and collaborating and looking for solutions. So that support has sort of a negative connotation because people think, okay, it's dollars. But I think, again, for us, it's creating a sustainable source of funding and support, per se, for San Antonio and arts organizations, but also looking again at that first level of artists that are doing amazing work and who here's my frustration, and I didn't know how to solve it. So I pushed really hard for artists, because if they got a 1099, they're a consultant. If they're paying taxes and they're contracting with organizations, then they're their own business, and they could apply for an SBA PPP loan. And so I worked with artists, but here was the dynamic and here was the problem. And it was something that didn't even occur to me because I'm not in that place anymore, is that they had to partner with their financial institution, with their bank, right? And most artists have a bank, but don't have a relationship with a banker. Most artists just use their bank to be able to deposit their checks or to cash to get money and use the ATM. They don't. Luckily, SAC has a pretty strong, financial advisor that I work with and know really well. So one is that was the first obstacle for artists, is that they were reaching out to their banks and their banks were not providing any details or information because they don't have a relationship with something. The other piece, which is again, the disappointing piece of this all, is that there was not a whole lot of money to be provided to small business owners like artists. So a lot of financial institutions didn't want to do it because it was going to take too much time and effort and they weren't going to get very much from it, right? That's why we saw that case of all of these larger companies getting these money. Finally, most of them gave it back. But the reality is that financial institutions were one of the problems too, because they weren't going to do the work and the effort to do this when the money that they were going to get was going to be minor to it. And that's another system that has to change.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it is also the mind of the artist that needs to change, but we're going to get there another day. So I'm grateful to have this conversation with you because you know also the variety of the arts and the artists in San Antonio so well. And it is obvious that among the people that are suffering the most, the artists are those. For me as an artist, that's a big problem because the same artists then cannot tell the stories that need to be told in this moment.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a way to do that, right? Not only they cannot go out, but their mind is thinking of, I need to put food on my table, right? So
yeah, that's that piece that's real important. Let me bring something else up, just because since you're going to be able to share this. What we're doing as arts leaders is that we're going to create this advocacy campaign, and one of the pieces for it is to be able to survey both organizations and artists. And so AFTA has this online survey that they're going to keep up that allows artists and individual organizations to put in their data. We're going to be able to get that information specific to San Antonio and use it. And Steve Nivens, who did the creative economy reports in the past, when you look at those creative economy reports, you can again see the major impact that arts and creativity has in our city. We're going to be able to look at that current data and those losses, compare it with our past economic reports on creativity. And that's going to be another reminder that data and where we are as a city is not where we need to be. So I just encourage everybody listening and others, and we're sharing that on social media, is that please go to the Americans for the Artist Survey or the organizational survey. Everybody's surveyed out, I'm surveyed out, but the reality is it takes a few minutes, and what it's going to do is give us some evidence to remind our city, to remind our funders why the arts are important. So I wanted to make sure I said that before we concluded our conversation.
Thank you very much. And so how can I help?
Share. So I'm going to, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to email you specifically. We've created, our friends at Blue Star Contemporary put together some branding material with the hyperlinks. We want to get this out to, I sent an email to all of the cultural arts organizations that were defunded by the city to please share. I just, this morning or late last night, I keep forgetting, I forget what day it is too. I guess that's a big issue for everybody as well. But I just shared that on the San Antonio Artists Supporting Other Artists. The more that we can get people to put together and take a few minutes to get this survey is one of the pieces that we need for the evidence-based process to remind our city funders. And then we use that as leverage to say, bring us to the table. Let us sit at the table. Let us be part of these discussions. In many ways, how dare you not have artists at the table, right?
That should be the slogan. Right?
Yeah.
That should be the slogan. But before we finish up, I would like to check with you on the youth that you're working with.
Yeah.
This is another piece of the work that we do, that you do, and then you do. So they are already at disadvantage
Yes.
prior to COVID.
Yeah.
So what do you know about them? How are they coping? Um, do you have stories?
We have, yeah, it's really, it's sort of the hardest piece. Again, what we did as an organization is try to figure out how to meet them where they were. We have, again, the majority of our kids are economically disadvantaged. Majority of our kids are SAISD kids. So when you look at sort of the impact that uh, this has had on school districts, and in particular inner city Title I districts, in many ways, their kids are our kids. The hardest part for us as an organization, the hardest part for me as an individual is, one is I think we've done an amazing job and we're continuing to sort of uh, uh, pivot and shift and do the kind of things that we do. Our teaching artists are amazing. They're creating these tutorial videos with their iPhones in their homes. We're putting together both a Vimeo and a YouTube channel. We're retweaking our website so that that's the first thing when you go to our homepage that you're going to see, where you can, what's cool is that we have a community program called ABC, Artist Building Communities. So we're sort of branding everything that we do primarily for our kids and for our families, but we're going to make it open and available to anybody. So as an organization that has strong relationships with other organizations, the goal is that you're going to get, in 2 weeks, you're going to be able to go to our webpage and be able to get all kinds of stuff. If you want to see videos of artists working, if you want to have interviews, if you want to see tutorials about how to create work. So that's one thing that we're working on really quickly. The harder part is knowing that our kids want to come back as soon as they can, and us having to be careful for the safety and health of them. The other piece is we are struggling with some students who we have not been able to reach. And so we're going to spend some time actually going to their homes to try to find them. What happens again with poor families is that their telephones get canceled, or they move. Or the other piece is that what we've heard a lot from our students is, especially parents. We have a parent who has 4 kids in the house, and they only have one device. And so one is they have to be caught up with their schoolwork, but they also are trying to connect to the organizations that they serve. So it's the connectability and devices that are the hardest part. We're going to work on a couple of things to really try to. We're going to take some money from our budget, and we're going to buy some cost-effective laptops and devices for our kids who need it the most, because it's the right thing to do. But then ultimately, the biggest thing that is the work that we're working on is they want to come back, but at the same time, how do we make it safe for them to come back? And so that's the big issue right now, is we're creating our policies and protocols. It's something that, again, I'm sharing with the other arts leaders, because we're all creating, all of us are different. There's museums that are involved, there's community centers that are involved, there's organizations like say that it's really a school because of the number of students that we serve. Same thing with Trinity. We hear more and more that universities are going to go to just distant learning in the fall. But so what we're doing right now is figuring out the safety and protocols to be able to have our students come back in a safe and healthy way. The hardest part about that, and the part that I don't think is going to get better, is there are only generic protocols. So if you go to the CDC website, there isn't a step-by-step process and protocol for nonprofits or arts education programs or schools to open. There's nothing federally, there's nothing statewide, and there's nothing locally. What they do is offer generic phase-in processes. So we, again, sort of talk about us dealing, luckily we are creative, as you described. We're having to create our own policies and protocols without any guidance from our public institutions, which is really problematic. So that's, to me, I believe that we were able to, again, shift and move quickly in meeting our kids where they need to be. But ultimately, the next step is, how do we go back? We're never going to go back to where things were. The world has changed.
Right.
There's not a new normal. It's a different normal. We're all going to live through this. And so one is that getting our heads around that, but also doing the right thing for our students, our constituency, our community. And that's the thing that is bearing heavily on my mind, but at the same time, I'm going to figure it out and work to make it happen. And luckily I have some partners locally and nationally that are lending their voice to the conversation as well.
So if you don't have some guidelines from our political leaders, but you are inventing new guidelines, then you can pass them to them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what we're doing. I've created I'll share it with you too. I've created a folder that it has multiple, it's a Google folder, but again, we're putting anybody that's sharing their policies and protocols, we're putting it into the local folder of the policies and protocols organizations are working with. We also have just some good sort of workspace ideas about triage. How do you work through this kind of issue as an organization? And then what I did is I put together what the generic protocols are from the CDC, from our city, from our state. And again, they're not very helpful, but at the same time, they are there. So what we know, and here's the other frustration, and this is where we have to be smart too, is, you know, when I'm out on national conferences and everything else, I always have to introduce myself as, one is I introduce myself as an artist working as an arts administrator, because my background is the arts. But two is I always say I'm from San Antonio, Texas, a blue dot in a very big red state, right? So we live in a great city, but we live also in a conservative state. And again, what's happening is that our governor and our state are pushing opening fast and forward without recognizing the impact that it's going to have on the lives of our communities. And that's where we have to be just really smart about it. And then the problem is that once the governor makes those decisions, then the cities cannot alter or change that. So it's really frustrating on that level. And I don't see that necessarily changing anytime soon.
Right. Well, thank you for all the work that you're doing, your leadership. Please keep posted and add me to the group if I can help. You know, I can also ask help from Trinity, and you know, Trinity has been always very involved with the community as much as it could, and there are so many wonderful people that could contribute. But let's keep this conversation happening, because, Jon, this is the moment.
Yes,
you know that better than me. This is the moment we have to find ways to, and Sebastian did something. He went public now with that.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah.
I know you have been public too, but you know, there is something that is happening.
Yeah. We need to get in people's faces. We need to remind them again that we can help change this. And so thank you for this work, and thanks for including me. And we will, I think the more that we can share and let people know what we're doing and the impact that it's going to have, the stronger we'll be. So it's really, again, about working collaboratively together to make that change.
Absolutely. So thank you. I appreciate it. And good luck to you. Keep safe.
Thank you. You too. Keep safe too. And it was great talking to you, Roberto. Keep up the good work.
Let's keep talking.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, man.
Thank you.